it's all about nature and the environment. And I mean, I'm from America. Like nature for us and working out is getting up, going to the kitchen, getting a snack, coming back. So. Hi, this is Opening the Playbook, What to Do When You've Been Hacked. If you are expecting another in-depth AppSec talk, you are in the wrong place, and I will give you time to get up and walk out. If you're expecting something that will scare you tonight and give you nightmares and keep you from falling asleep, you are in the right place. So. A little bit about me. I was an early employee of Evernote, and that is what we're going to be talking about today. Also, Spirit Airlines, which is the largest airline in the United States, actually. I'm one of the only female advisory board chairs of an engineering school in the world for University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I've won a lot of awards. Here's just a few of them up there. I'm the author of Birth of a Unicorn, 6 Basic Steps to Success, which has also won a lot of awards on its own, which is about the founding of Evernote. And I've had the misfortune of overseeing one of the largest security breaches in tech history. So, yeah, this is going to be a fun talk. Not really. So, a little history before we get into the breach itself. The story probably doesn't start where you thought it was going to. In order to properly explain how the security incident at my company Evernote happened, you need to know a few things about our team in the first place. The story actually started in Boston on the 11th of September in 2001. Some of you might actually not have been born yet, but for me and my friends, we will never forget where we were or what we were doing that day. This drove us to switch from our previous jobs, which actually were around just general software consulting. I was in game design, but we then immediately decided to create a software security company. And we wanted to ensure that what happened that day would never happen again. And for those of you that don't know what happened that day, ask your elders in the room. For the next 6 years, under the leadership of CEO Phil Libin, we created a suite of products, both hardware and software, based around physical access to locations. So we became experts in both digital and physical security at the highest level. We were infiltrated into the government, and so pretty much every time you see an RFID-enabled door lock anywhere in the world, that's us. That's our technology. Our smart credentials became the basis of every RFID-enabled door lock around the world. So we did what we had set out to do, and then it was time to do something else. So we turned our sights to a new project, note-taking. Using our background in security, we approach this differently than every other productivity and note-taking team out there. Rather than data mining and selling people's content to marketers, we wanted to focus on keeping people's information private. We wanted to be the people that would help you remember everything and live stream. So if Phil Libin wanted to create a cure for Alzheimer's digitally. So any note, anything that you wanted to capture would become your external brain. And we didn't want people to lose their trust in us. The notes people created were treated by us as sensitive information that drove our core values. What differentiated us from OneNote and Google Keep and every other note-taking tool out there was that people trusted us with their private and most sensitive memories. And it was our duty to keep that trust. While we were building Evernote, always from that security standpoint first, which is extremely rare for a startup, the rest of the business world wasn't having an easy go of it. Some of the largest breaches in internet history happened between 2007 and 2012. starting with the Heartland credit card incident claiming financial data of over 120 million people, then the 3 Sony breaches totaling over 100 million in rapid succession, then Dropbox with 68 million, Ubisoft with over almost 60 million, Steam, Blizzard, Apple, and LinkedIn with almost 100 million between them. And that's not even counting the Yahoo breach that we didn't find out about until years later that happened in early 2013 that had 1 billion people breached. So frankly, by the beginning of 2013, it was likely that if you were on the internet at all, your name, email, password, and some sort of NPPI was out there on the nascent dark web. So what's NPPI? If you've ever signed up for a financial service, like opened a credit card or bank account online, created like some sort of insurance thing, paid rent, had a telemedicine appointment, or applied for a loan, you've disclosed NPPI. In the early days of the internet, before these things were properly regulated, just regular software companies were asking for all sorts of NPPI. You may have even asked for this information without requiring it, without needing it or properly storing it. With multiple breaches giving partial lists of this information, it became much easier for hackers to daisy chain the information and get a complete profile of a person without any effort at all. So it's been a long road since that first day in 2001. We now have over a decade of experience on our team in building enterprise-grade security, and we have proper data handling practices. We've managed to grow our business in a relatively safe bubble, of course, with the normal worries that every startup has about funding and customers and growth and acquisition and all of that stuff. And we've avoided all of that stuff with breaches. And as a security-minded company, we had multi-factor authentication on our roadmap for years, but it had never been a high enough priority. Our market research told us we'd have less than 5% adoption once we added it, so we kept developing more valuable features and reducing tech debt. By early 2013, however, we finally had some developer time to put it in. It was added to our beta branch and required for all administrator roles by Christmas of 2012. So every administrator, everyone that had access to user data on production was using two-factor authentication by 2012. That is extremely important for this story. By the last week of February 2013, there were still 2 unclosed bugs on two-factor authentication. They were both related to receiving the multi-factor token. Basically, the bugs were, it was a timeout issue. So, and anyone that's tried to create a two-factor system that isn't using Okta or something like that, if you've tried to build this from scratch, this was 2013, Okta didn't exist yet, or at least it wasn't as easy to build in. If the token doesn't arrive in time, it times out, somebody's locked out of their account. And as the head of global support, which was my role, I made the decision, and it was my call, to not install multi-factor until we had this straightened out. And like this decision has stuck in my head forever, because basically I didn't want to have to deal with telling someone, we can't give you your account back, you're locked out, and we can't do anything about it. If anyone's ever been locked out of their Coinbase account or lost their Bitcoin or anything like that, this is the kind of nightmare scenario that was in my head that would happen. So until we fixed those bugs, I was not enabling two-factor. And then came everybody's worst nightmare. On February 28th, we identified a security incident in progress. By March 2nd, we sent out a notice to all of our affected users, all 50 million users, that our user list had been compromised. Their usernames, email addresses, and hashed and salted passwords were obtained. So what does that mean? A lot of people asked why we didn't store all of the data encrypted at rest. Well, the only thing that mattered was the passwords, so we initially had thought. With hashing and salting, it should never have been an issue because without a supercomputer and tons of compute time, it should have taken like millions of years to crack that password list. But we stupidly had not been paying attention to all of those other breaches from 2007 until then. So what happened was the ramifications of someone getting the username and email list against our 50 million user list, they didn't need the passwords because they could brute force in. If they already knew usernames and passwords that did work, all they needed was about 1,000 passwords that they were sure of, and within 2 weeks, we calculated they could crack all 50 million. So it went from 1 million years to they could get the cipher for our hash in 2 weeks. So suddenly, every login to Evernote, we took the server down. Everybody was gone to the change password screen if you could get in, because 50 million users hitting us all at once meant our servers were up and down for days. So, what happened? That's what you're all here to find out, right? Okay, step by step. Day 0. Our IT manager receives system alerts. There is an unusual amount of traffic detected. Now, first of all, who here actually has system alerts that would tell them that there's an unusual amount of traffic? It's okay if you don't raise your hand. But, oh, that's only about a quarter of you. So the first thing that the rest of you are going to do when you get back is set up some system alerts, right? So that you know, well, first you have to decide what is unusual amounts of traffic. So you have to figure out what your regular amount of traffic is. You have to start monitoring your traffic. Then, right away, within a minute, he started an investigation. Is it one of our API partners? Because we had an active API system. Like, were they misconfigured? Was somebody on the news? Like, this was a growing company. We were, like, on the news a lot. We had a lot of people that were telling us, like, is this valid traffic bump, or is there something wrong? Within half an hour, he was sure that this was a brute force attack. So he then diverted the incoming traffic to a honeypot that we'd already set up. Who here knows what a honeypot is? Yes. That's why I like security conferences. Awesome. All right, so within half an hour, he had enough information to debrief our VP of engineering. So our VP of engineering gets all this information together, gets his head together, and then debriefs our CTO. As the VP of engineering is talking, our CTO is sitting there with his computer, getting all of the system logs, checking for himself everything that everybody's already done. He finds anomalies. He finds even more stuff wrong because he's going back further in the logs. And he gathers a report together. Within 15 minutes, he gathers everything, and he gathers the CMO, the COO, the CEO, and he's briefing them that there's a security incident in progress. Within 15 minutes of that, the rest of the department heads are briefed. I mean, we're talking marketing, legal, everybody. And then, or sorry, not legal yet. At 4 o'clock, the legal department is then brought in. And at 5 o'clock, just a few hours after, is when we decide the ramifications of this are we have to reset everybody's passwords. That is how quickly we realized that the list is going to have to be, that it's going to take 2 weeks for them to crack this. Day 1. So now everybody's been working through the night. We have 38 product SKUs that are going to be affected by this. So all of the product leads for all of those SKUs have to give us a time frame of how long it's going to take them to update all of those products. The first one is the one that we have to focus on is patching the server, of course. That's the main priority, but as soon as we patch that server, none of the other products are going to sync, and then people's notes aren't going to sync. So we have to, this is a time crunch that we're now in. So the first meeting of the day happens, Then head of support team, me, meets with legal to start crafting the initial email announcement, blog post, email, and replies in 12 supported languages. I cannot tell you how wonderful it is to try and explain to them that we have to use certain greetings in different languages that mean I'm groveling at your feet, please don't kill me, versus like greetings. Like, I mean, there's certain nuances to, like, we have screwed up that you have to make sure that you get right the first time. Then we have an all-hands meeting. This is the first time that people outside of the department heads know what's happening. Meanwhile, like, the rest of the employees kind of know that something's up, but until this moment, they don't know exactly what. And I can tell you that as our core values of the company were your data is private, your data is portable, your data is protected. Those were the 3 core values of the company. This was a gut punch to everyone. And suddenly, because everybody, since there's 450 employees, anyone that is not an engineer becomes instantly a support employee. And we have to retrain them on that right away, because we know that something's coming down the pike as soon as we let people know. So then the next department head meeting happens. We now have agreed of when we're going to do the password reset, because we have the product team for web, the server, has said that they can get that done by the next morning. Now we finally tell the board, because we have an action plan, we know what's happened, and there was no point in telling the board until there was something to tell them. So IT is continuing to monitor the honeypot logs. So the hackers still think they're hacking. They still think they're getting in, and honeypot's doing its job. For the rest of the day, everybody's still getting ready. We're still trying to patch everything, and we're getting all of the data that we need to start filing all of the stuff that we need to. The fateful day of Saturday, March 2nd, we take down the server for maintenance, and we begin loading the security patch. Within 2 hours, it's loaded. And then we start sending the batch of security incident passwords to all 50 million recipients. Does anyone know how long it takes to send 50 million emails? It took about 48 hours, which was faster than we thought it would. But, I mean, in that time, unless you'd received the email, you had no idea why you couldn't get into your account, because it's not syncing. And if you tried to reach the server, it was down because most people were trying to hit the server. So, I mean, it was a nightmare. Then that is when we filed the security incident with our state board. So we waited until it was already done, and that's when we filed the security incident, because we knew there was a point of no return here. And then the CEO briefed the board again to let him know, hey, this is done. No going back, here's what we did. Then the department heads meet to level set on the timeline for the rest of the SKU updates, and then just everything continues rolling. So we just kept working. And then day 3 and beyond, California District Attorney gets the report. They're obviously a little concerned about it, so they tell the FBI, and then they take over. By Monday morning. Those vans had showed up at the office, and they take all our computers away. So I never got my Dell back. It was sad. I had this really sweet one too. Support request volume went from 2,000 tickets a day to 20,000 a day. It was a good thing we had started training those extra employees, non-engineer employees, to be support people already, because for the next month, that was all they did. We focused on fixing the Evernote main app first. So iOS and Android, as you know, usually it takes a while to get an iOS thing pushed. We had a really good, and still do, Evernote has a really good relationship with Apple. They pushed it overnight. and Android, it was a REST request too. Mac and Windows versions were also ready by Wednesday, but that means people weren't syncing for a half a week. And then the ancillary versions were ready later in the week. But then the other products we had, like Evernote Food, Evernote Peak, Skitch, all those, and any of our APIs. We had over 10,000 people that were connected through our API. They had to do security patches as well, and it took a while for that. So anytime you have a breach, there's so much stuff that goes on, and you're not ready for it. Like, you think you're ready, you're not ready for it. We managed to be prepared ahead of time, and this was how prepared we were. We managed to, it only took us a few days to get everything done. So hopefully the rest of this talk will help you to be as calm and prepared when you find out that you've been hacked. So here's the playbook broken down. So the first thing, set up before you find out you've been hacked, because I'm just going to go under the assumption that everybody either already has been and you don't know it yet, or you're going to be at some point. Set up a network monitoring and alert system. We already know that 2/3 of you do not have this set up yet. So your selected network monitoring solution should be able to monitor your entire IT infrastructure, not just the thing that you're working on. It should be everything in the company, even the stuff that marketing's doing, like especially the stuff that marketing's doing. There should be an automatic configuration of devices. The solution should be able to monitor and troubleshoot network, server, and application performance. And this is especially more important now that we're all distributed. I know it's annoying to be like nanny camming people, but it doesn't have to go that far, but the stuff that we're working on for clients, for our users, that stuff is really important to take care of. You should be using advanced network performance monitoring techniques. And advanced reporting capabilities with facilities to schedule. So, you should be getting however frequent reports sent to you. We were getting reports every hour, which made sense for a company our size. Maybe you only need them once a day. Maybe you need them twice a day. But whatever makes sense for your company, you should be having scheduled reports sent to you. If you don't have anything set up yet, look into OSSEC, Snort, something like that. They're really easy to get set up, and you'll remember Snort. It's easy. The difference, so set up a honeypot and or a honeynet to divert suspicious traffic. I'm glad you already know what those are, because those aren't common. I don't know why they're not common. I don't know why not everybody's doing this. The difference between a honeypot and a honeynet is that a honeypot is a trap set to detect or deflect attempts at unauthorized use of information systems, and honeynets are a bunch of them chained together. So honeypots and honeynets don't store actual sensitive information, but they look like they do. And this is really important, because you want these to be attractive to a hacker. So you want it to look enough like your real server that they think that they've got something useful, and that they'll just keep hacking it so that when the feds come in, they're still there doing it. You want them to have security holes that are easily exploitable but not too easy, and information on them that looks real enough that they think that they've got something good. So setting up a honeynet is a fun job to give to somebody like an intern. Set up a responsible disclosure program. This does not mean that your company is bad. Setting up a responsible disclosure program means that your company is good. So a disclosure program is a way for a security researcher to disclose a security issue that they found. And having a well-defined vulnerability disclosure program shows that your company takes security seriously and welcomes feedback about to improve the security of your product. So, and there's so many different ways to do this. If you have a private product that you can't have an open vulnerability program, then make people sign NDAs and do all sorts of levels of things. But no matter what your product is, you can have a responsible disclosure program, and it does not look bad upon you if somebody finds something wrong with your product. And what I particularly love about it as a CTO is that I can outsource somebody finding stuff rather than having to hire internally. Create your response team. Wait, what is the... Sorry, I put the steps wrong. So create your response team. A data breach incident response team varies by breach, but it can and should include an executive that has instant decision-making authority. I mean, this person needs to just be able to snap their fingers and say go, and people need to be able to listen to them, not an intern. A team leader responsible for handling the overall data breach response, and internal security and IT personnel who actually can describe what's actually happening and keep looking at the logs. Somebody from legal, because they can help you figure out what to say and what not to say and make sure that you keep it out of writing. Public relations, internal and or possibly external, depending on how big your company is. External forensics advisors, depending on what type of breach it is. HR, if employees are affected or they might have been the cause. And financial, if you are a company that handles NPPI. So again, to recap, before a security incident, set up network monitoring and alert system, set up a honeypot and or a honeynet, set up a responsible disclosure program, and create your response team. All right, then, when it is happening, right away, you want to investigate unusual traffic. So data about network activities is the kind of thing that you're going to look into, and it can be collected from various sources. So first thing, look into administrator probes, so like ICMP logs, port probes, SNMP queries. These are simple things that you can look into. Log files from routers, firewalls, other network hosts and devices, alert reports, error reports, network performance statistic reports, outputs of tools for in-depth analysis. Like these are, like every bit of information that you can get, make sure that you have been collecting this data so that you can compare it to see that there's a difference. And you should watch for unexpected network behavior, like unexpected changes in network performance, so traffic load at different times, traffic coming from or going to unexpected locations on your network, or from different countries. Ours was coming from countries you might expect a hack to have been coming from. Connections made at unusual times, repeated failed connection attempts, unauthorized scans and probes, or non-standard or malformed packets. So lots of protocol violations. So these are the kinds of things that you should look for. Then, of course, analyze it. So once you have all that data, then you want to strategize. So before you actually begin, before you say this is a security breach, is this a fluke? Is this a misconfiguration? Is this, are we on the news? Figure out what is the data actually telling me? Because remember, most hacks are so easy. Is this, and it could just be simple. Is somebody just brute forcing you? Or is it is it a script kiddie doing something? Or is it real hackers doing something? So you don't want to go overboard, but you do want to be alarmed, potentially. So then gather that information together, because you want to document every step. You want to find the date and time of the breach as it's happening, who discovered it, what is the nature of it, because there are so many different types of breach that could be occurring, and any data that was taken or compromised. And this log that you start taking could change. So every time you discover something, make sure you're capturing those things. And employee interviews might be appropriate, which is another reason to have HR. You want to know any employees that had access to any infected or affected systems, and any employees that might have been terminated within the last year or so. There's a lot of things that can go wrong when an employee leaves a company. So don't rule anything out when you're investigating a security incident. Notify those in your organization of the incident who actually need to know. Be quiet. Remember, we didn't tell anyone else except our incident response team for almost an entire day. Not every incident constitutes a breach. So not everything needs to be lawfully reported. So note the date and time of the discovery, capture all that information, and be aware that internal communications could be discoverable. I must say at this point, I am not a lawyer. I do not have a legal degree. I'm not, but everything I say here should not be taken as legal advice, but anything you write down can be discoverable. So be very careful what you say and how you say it when speaking about a security incident. So then contain it. What type of incident is it? Many major breaches today involve ransomware or some type of data theft. Some of you might have been involved in some sort of NHS ransomware stuff I was talking to outside. So if any data has been taken, if so, is it possible to retrieve the lost or stolen device or wipe the data from that device? Find out if it's possible to arrange for the return of the data. Is it possible to enter into a non-disclosure agreement or some kind of attestation for return of the data? Can you just pay them and end this? Whatever the easiest thing to do to close the breach, figure that out, because it'll be much easier in the long run. But still, gather that information, write it all down, capture it all. Then secure and prevent physical access to the affected systems. Preserve your computer logs. If it was a vendor that caused your breach, request retention and copies of relevant evidence, like the server images, the logs, tracking information. Make sure that they get all that data for you and that you get it. And await a forensic team advice, but do not probe the system. Don't let the intruders know that you're onto them. Leave the affected systems running so that any evidence in temporary memory is preserved. Don't reboot your systems. Don't run antivirus software. Don't run anti-malware software. Don't do any of that. If it's an incident in progress, it needs to keep going until the forensics people get there. And I know that sucks, but that's how it is. But if you haven't got good legal counsel or any legal counsel as part of your incident response team, now's the time to give them the heads up. You've contained the breach, and now you have a good understanding of what's going on. So before the first day is done, get them on the phone or in person, and avoid putting as much as possible in writing. Just CYA. I don't know if that translates, but just make sure that you've got all your bases covered. So day 0, investigate unusual traffic, analyze the incident, gather information, notify the incident response team, contain the breach, secure and preserve evidence, and consult or retain legal counsel. Got it? Okay. Now, analyze your legal obligations. So your lawyers should have been working through the night on this one to help you at a large billing number. And they should be able to tell you now if the nature of your breach requires reporting. In America, There are a lot of laws about this, and each state is different. So it's wonderful. For us, it was California. So we had a time-sensitive notification. So we had we had a specific law on at what time we had to tell people about a breach. There was a risk of harm analysis that we had to do based on how many people were harmed, and there was a specific calculation done to figure out like how many people were harmed. There's encryption safe harbor laws, private cause of action laws. You had to figure out if it was like paper and or electronic people are harmed. So depending on what your jurisdiction is, like what country you're in, what local jurisdiction you're in, whether it's international, so you have to pay attention to all of these things. And the best advice I can give you there is if you don't know, just file locally and let them figure it out. So we filed with our state and then let them let everyone else know. Then prepare your public statements. So the scope of engagement with public relations will depend on the size of the incident. So, but no matter what, you do need to prepare statements, and multiple ones. So like social media, individual mailings, so both like probably like actual direct mail and email. You can't just rely on email, text messages, press quotes, press release, customer support emails, and support reply scripts for chat and like email responses, fax for the website. All of these are going to need to be pre-written and pre-approved by legal so as not to admit any guilt or wrongdoing. We didn't do anything wrong. Nothing happened. Because prior to the closure of any investigation, you didn't do anything wrong. Nothing happened. You don't know what happened. It's under investigation. Even if you know exactly what happened, you didn't know what happened. And once the investigation's closed, you still can't say anything. So no representative of the company should ever say anything that is not scripted in relation to a security incident. You should cover every single, you should have something for every single scenario. PR needs to work with legal to avoid admissions against interest, loss of privilege, anything. But people can still figure out kind of what happened based on like the nature and like what you're saying. So you also have to be careful with what you're releasing. Then you have to figure out what your remediation efforts are. So you need to decide any assistance that you're going to be providing to people because of your security incident. So some things, I mean, for some it's just going to be, okay, well, we're resetting your password. We're giving you a coupon for one password. Other things are credit monitoring services, identity theft. Depending on the nature of your breach, it might not be anything, but you have to decide if you're going to do it and what. And then set up public inquiry support channels. So public inquiry response is response plan and response team. You may receive numerous inquiries for the public. Not may, you will. Lots of them, lots and lots, so many. We went from 2,000 support requests to 20,000 in one day, and it never went down after that. A toll-free number or an email address for inquiries, train call center employees or an outsourced center. You're going to need fax, so many fax, and they're going to stay up there forever. They're going to be at the top of Google for the rest of your life, all about this. So when you have your hack, be prepared for the support onslaught. And then contact your insurer. So the demand for cyber insurance has increased exponentially. I don't know why. I can't even imagine why. But cyber insurance is a developing product. And not every country allows it. But if yours does, then there's no standard form to it, but a lot of them have riders specifically for network security risk, media liability risk, which covers claims related to slander, libel, and defamation, extortion. So it can cover when somebody's trying to claim money from Bitcoin for you to give your data back, business interruption costs, In addition, your cyber insurance might have a rider that provides for remediation in case of business interruption. So like it can pay for that customer support hotline you need to outsource. So check your policy for what you need to do to trip that coverage. They might just need you to give them all of that data log right away and before you even report it to any authorities. So day one, analyze legal obligations, prepare settlement statements, define remediation efforts, set up public inquiry support channels, and contact your insurer. So who here has cyber insurance? Who here is going to get cyber insurance? Thinking about it, maybe? It's useful. All right, now, finally, day 2+ is going to be different for every company. Like, there's no specific day that this happens. Like, if you are a hardware company, this could be like months down the line from the time you first hear the initial incident. It was immediately for us because we had a playbook. We immediately knew what to do. We had our incident plan, and we were software. So, like, we could act quickly. But for some companies, this is going to be, this date could be a moving target. So while the first 2 days have been mostly investigation and preparation, no actual action has been taken yet. And you might not have noticed that, but it's true. You haven't done anything except tell legal and get statements ready. But this is now when you're starting to come to the point of no return. In a software company, this is when you'll be able to stop and figure out what's feasible to make any adjustments if necessary to your product to prevent future breaches. And in a hardware company, this is the start of a much, much longer conversation. For financial services companies, this will be the beginning of a very long line of regulatory investigations and other things. But really, this is the last time that you're going to have before anyone outside of that small incident response team knows what's happening. And then after that point, and this could be really, like for some companies, this is years later. But whenever you decide to do this, this is when you notify your customers. So it's time to rip off the Band-Aid and let the world know what happened. Use your prepared statements and don't deviate in any way. Then you can file the report with the authorities. So in some cases, you will have had to do this earlier. Like if it was like the Experian breach where they didn't notify people for years, obviously the investigation had happened prior to that. But in most cases, like hopefully you're doing this much faster. But in every security incident, you're going to open yourself up to a variety of post-breach legal issues. So, and those could be disputes between controllers and processors, and it's going to come down between the language in all of your contracts. And they could sue you for like legal fees, data breach remediation, cost of notification, forensic consultants, like other consultants, like credit card company agreements. So like you could get liability for the breach, PCI certified forensic analysis, like all of these things that the credit cards are going to go after you for, insurance coverage disputes. So like, yeah, you might have that cyber insurance, but they might be like, nope, you didn't give me all of the information in exactly the way that I wanted it. And then the dreaded one, especially in the USA, class action lawsuits from all of your users because they claim that you did bad things to them. So yeah, legal Armageddon is coming your way. And it looks like we have lost the, hold on, let's try this again. Is it coming back? This happened before, yes. Yes.
So you had a disaster plan. Did you ever practice it?
So yes, we did. So the question was, did we practice our disaster plan? We actually did do drills with our team. Our incident response team was very aware that they were the incident response team. We had what were called holding statements for different scenarios. It made it much easier for us to be able to fill those in based on the response. And about the only people that weren't practiced in this were the rest of the employees. So all of our response team was fully aware. And we did do drills with penetration testing and with the honeypot and all of that. So like everyone that was part of the incident response team was fully aware of their roles and had been testing them. So now that you have your playbook, now that you know like what it is that you need to do and what you can expect, you should be great, right? Like this is gonna, you're good. You don't have to worry about this again. And it's still not working. Later that year, in October, I'll talk without slides. In October of 2013, one of our vendors was hacked. They had a security breach. Our forum software, because we used forums, user forums, View Bulletin, had, I think it was 35,000 sites of View Bulletin were hacked through a security exploit. So we went from, so in March, we were just dealing with that, and then in October, our forums were hacked. Now, it was our vendor's fault, but like we were already like, we lost our users' trust twice in 1 year. But I mean, the people on the forums just kind of thought it was funny, and they were okay with it. But then, just a month after that, Adobe suffered a security breach of their own. We took the opportunity to let everyone know that two-step verification was available. And we sent them out an email about that. Our initial estimate originally that 5% of adoption would turn out to be incorrect. 2% adoption of two-factor authentication. And then in June of 2019, another 4.5 million people were hit by an exploit in our Chrome clipper. So we only had 4.5 million people hacked that time, so I think we did better. But yeah, I mean, these are the kinds of things, like the more applications that exist, the more applications that exist, the more people on the internet, the more credentials that are going to get stolen. And there's so many data breaches that are out there. It's just so much money that people are trying to get. But the problem is, it's just too easy. Like people are not they're not trying hard. They don't need to try hard. Like for ours, it turned out that it was just all of those lists that had already been stolen. I mean, we didn't even know. Like we thought, okay, well, it's from the Sony hack or the LinkedIn hack or the whatever hack. It was probably the Yahoo hack that had the 1 billion passwords that everybody had already stolen. So some practical steps to take in addition to the ones that I've already given you, if this works, I'll just read them. So develop some privacy policies for your company if you don't have them already. Make sure you have an information security plan, an incident response plan, a disaster recovery plan, secure password policy, and electronic communications and internet use policy. Make sure that your company's risk profile is like okay, and educate and train your workforce, secure your workflows, and ensure compliance of all service providers. Implement a sound document destruction policy, and make sure that you have security controls for like administrative, physical, and network security. Like, there's so many different types of security controls that you need to pay attention to. That you need to make sure that you are training your staff on everything, that your desks are clean when you actually are in the office. Like, don't put passwords on Post-it notes on your computer. Use encrypted email when you're sending you're sending PII out. I mean, please, like, if I get CC'd on a mass thing when HR is updating people's like 401ks with people's like whole family's social security numbers one more time, I'm just gonna cry. So make sure you're protecting your data. There's like, in order to assess your risk profile, and I'm gonna, when this actually shows up, it's gonna have a whole bunch of stuff on the screen. But there's, you wanna make sure that you're conducting background checks with people and that passwords are protected, but with limited access. That your devices are locked down at night, that your servers are secure with limited access, that you destroy old hard drives of computers and copiers. I know somebody in this room does not destroy his old hard drives and that they're just sitting in a closet. That mobile devices are secure and that they can be remotely wiped clean. That paper files are secured when they leave your office. Especially when they leave with couriers, that you actually know that that courier is a courier and not just a random person that just walked into your office. That you have oversight of any fourth-party service providers that are storing NPPI. That you have secured points of entry to your office. That you control the use of flash drives. I work with the government, and flash drives are a huge deal. I don't know how many people, I mean, I know some people are with NHS. Flash drives are a bigger problem than you think. Do you utilize strong passwords? And it doesn't mean, and a strong password just doesn't mean adding an exclamation point to the end of it. Like, look up what a real strong password is. Have disaster management plans, have audit procedures, make sure your email attachments are encrypted. There's just screenshot that and go on. Resources for incident response tools. There is a great GitHub repo for how to set up all sorts of incident response tools called Awesome Incident Response by Mirwa, and then communication templates it's called Cyber Incidents from Willow Ram, if this does show up. If not, you'll see it later. But I do have a few minutes left for questions, if anyone has questions. Yes?
I was a paying customer when...
Sorry?
And I'm a password researcher for 23 years. I was heavily involved with the LinkedIn breach and also the Ashley Madison security. So you mentioned the communications part, preparing statements. Is that something that you had done before it happened, or did you actually have to do it like overnight?
So as I mentioned briefly, we had holding statements. A holding statement is something that is standard in public relations and marketing. They are basically like, you have scenarios set up where you are like, you're like, okay, well, I thought of the worst case scenario and here's what I'm going to say, but then I just have to fill in like a template of like, this is the thing that's happened. So we had holding statements in the playbook for like security breach. And so yes, we did have those in there, but what we didn't have was them translated and the nature of the breach. So we did have to like get them translated because we didn't know ahead of time that we had, when we wrote the playbook, we were only in 3 languages. Yeah, it was, so yes, and there were a couple of more scenarios that we had to write, but most of them were already written.
Also, the sending out the password resets within 48 hours. Is that something that you had anticipated or thought about before, or setting up the entire system, or was that also like a shocker to you? Oh shit, it's actually 48 hours.
So the question is, did we anticipate that it was going to take us, ahead of time, did we anticipate that it was going to take us 48 hours to send out the password reset emails? When we set up the playbook did not include us doing a password reset because we had not anticipated ever having to do a password reset. That wasn't a scenario that we'd thought of because we thought hashed and salted passwords were great. But we knew from our marketing, like talking to our head of marketing, that in order to reach all of our people, that it was going to take 2 days to do it. So on that first day, in that meeting, that was when, okay, we're gonna reset people, 50 million people. It's going to take 2 days.
You mentioned earlier that because of the breaches beforehand, the attackers would be able to reach all the passwords in just 2 weeks. Can you explain a bit more how the previous breaches would affect the response?
Yes. So the question is, how did the previous breaches affect the brute force time and change it from like a million years to 2 weeks? Basically, when passwords are hashed and salted, there is if they're hashed, there's a cipher key that is one way. So we would know the hash, but somebody else would have to figure that out. If they're salted, it adds another thing to the end of the hash, so it makes it like ridiculously hard, that much harder to figure out. But basically, by having all of the other passwords out there and their email addresses and usernames, they basically had a decoder ring for our password list. So all they had to do, instead of brute forcing our system, they just had to brute force the list against the other passwords. So once they were able to find a match on the encryption key, they just kept having to keep doing that with passwords that were already known. And then as soon as they had decrypted the list, then they could brute force it against our system. So it was just, if they were trying known passwords on users that they had and just brute forcing those into our system. And as soon as they had, I think they figured out that they only needed 1,000 of them to be be able to decrypt the hash. that was the thing back then. So. The question is, was the hacker identified, or were the group of hackers identified? The answer is yes, and no, I cannot tell you who they are.
But there's someone in this room.
There's someone. They're right here. No. And yes, we were able to identify exactly the attack, like the attack vector, how they got in, like all of that. So. I think we have time for one more question, if anyone has it. Oh, yes.
How come the FBI was involved?
The FBI becomes involved in the United States if it is over state lines. So, and later, other investigative bodies can become involved as well if it becomes an international issue. Which it was.
You mentioned that the password leak. How much of people actually notes?
None. So the question was, were people's notes taken? No note data was taken. As I mentioned earlier in the very beginning, all of the administrator data on the production server where people's notes were stored, all the administrators had two-factor authentication on their accounts. So no administrator accounts that would have allowed people to get access to notes were accessed. So no note data was taken. It was just the user data. I mean, so yeah, so like because all of the roles that had access to notes had two-factor authentication on, our hack was secure. No, it wasn't as bad as it could have been, but it was still bad. All right, well, thank you all for spending some time with me this afternoon, and enjoy the party.